Hi, we are for AudioStellar. It is a software. Awesome. So AudioStellar is a software that is meant to use AI. It analyzes sound samples that are put into it and organizes them visually into clusters based on similar sounds. Yeah, and that's all I've got for this. Awesome. No, you're good. I was thinking. Awesome. So AudioStellar was designed by researchers at Montreff Center for Art and Science at the National University of Tres de Febrero. It's led by Leandro Garber in collaboration with Nicholas Thomas Cola, Juan Cruz Amus.
You can see that right there for pronunciation.
Listen.
No, you got it.
Girl, I can't. I'm sorry. And then students at this center and university. The ideas that brought forth AudioStellar was the ideas of bringing together technology and music performance.
All right, and AudioStellar has 3 different unit types, which I'll be talking about. And when you open AudioStellar, these will be on the left-hand side, and you can kind of select them and add different units like you would tracks in a DAW. And then on the right-hand side, you'll have the effects panel where you can add all types of different effects, change the parameters, things like that. And each type of unit creates different ways to interact with the samples. So first we have the Explorer unit. This is the default mode. It's going to be the mode you're in automatically when you open AudioStellar. It's used for analysis and exploration. So basically, for this unit, you can just take the mouse and select individual samples. You can also hold down and just kind of slide your mouse through, and you'll be able to hear the samples you cross over. There's also a trajectory parameter potential, so you can create a trajectory, and then whatever samples are within that trajectory, it'll just play them in that order. It's kind of similar to a sequencer, except it doesn't cycle through the way a sequencer would. And then that's just a picture. It's kind of hard to see. We'll have a demo for you guys, and everything will make a little more sense.
Cool.
Oh.
There we go. And then next is the particle unit. This generates particles that play samples as they move. So you'll see little red particles, and these can be used to, the user can control particle parameters. So basically particles, there's a swarm mode, and they'll just kind of jiggle around and interact with the audio samples. And there's also an explosion setting where the particles will just disperse a mass amount of them. And then you can play with those parameters. You can kind of slow down how quickly the particles disperse. So there's a lot of ways to control how they interact with the audio samples. And then there's another picture. And then lastly, the third unit is the sequence unit. We're all familiar with sequencers, and you can create constellations by connecting points on the map. So when you select different audio samples, it'll create a line between them, and that will be your points connected for a sequence, and you can connect however many points you want. There's a mutation parameter, which allows the sequence to change, so it can just kind of mutate and change over time. I think this would be really cool for ambient music, if you just have chords playing, and then you have the mutation. As long as you have notes that sound good together, it can just kind of individually create its own composition. And yeah, that's basically it. I think we have another picture of this unit. You can kind of see that little sequence over here. And effects and features. Sorry, I was brain dead. So I talked a little bit about this, but there's that effects thing on the right-hand side, and there's reverb filters, chorus delay, saturation, things like that. They can really change the sound of samples. There's also a reverse button, so you can play the samples backwards. The unit parameters, there's trajectory. Like I talked about with the particles, there's the swarm versus explosion, and then with the sequencer, there is mutation.
All right, so for the advantages of AudioStellar, first of all, it's open source. It's very new, so it's very easily modified. You're able to control it through a variety of different methods, such as using OSC, which is Open Sound Control. It's sort of a newer, I guess, newer way to control sound that's different from MIDI in that it has more applications, basically. MIDI, obviously, as you can see, is another way to control it. It's hackable. You have a visual sort of element to it with the constellations and everything going on there. It groups samples based on their spectral qualities, so you have that sort of visual element there. And yeah, there's a friendly community. It has like a YouTube page with tutorials. It's still a very new software, so there is like sort of, there's not that much information out there, but there is still quite a bit. And there's also like Facebook groups and Discord groups that are involved with this, where some of them I believe you can actually talk to the developers themselves. And yeah. And so for the disadvantages, it's still very new in developing. The software is very finicky, and it's like the features are very technical. There's a lot of technical language in there. There's also possibly a limit on the sample amount, and there's a limit on the sort of things that you can do with it. Like, for example, it seems to do a lot better with shorter percussive samples. When we tried doing our demo, we tried making our own demo for this, and we used a lot of different pitched samples rather than percussion, and it didn't seem to group them properly as it would with the original demo. Yeah, and that goes into, obviously, the limited abilities up there. There are some firewall issues if you're on a Mac that you might have trouble getting through. And yeah, you need, obviously, some coding knowledge to work with some of the more in-depth features with this, such as the OSC unit. And language barriers. This is developed by a South American team, and so in finding information for this, you have to obviously cross a language barrier. There's some in English, there's some in Spanish. Yeah.
All that being said, though, we do have several opportunities and applications possible for AudioStellar. There's the interactive art installation. This was, I'm not going to attempt to try to say that full name of the project, but basically the project there for the art installation was at a conference at the Moontriff Center. They had many people at this conference do different speaking samples, and they took samples of those and made a big demo set with all these clusters. And then guests were able to go in, and they could actually physically like move their arms and hands and like explore the samples, and it was an interactive sort of installation. The second is that it has recording and compositional capabilities. Like we were saying earlier, you could make a soundscape. We were messing with it the other day, and we were like, ooh, this could sound really cool, like ambient, and then we made it reverse. We added like reverb, and we're like, this now sounds like horror. And then we have the opportunity for live performance. And we're just going to show you a little clip here.
Is it sharing audio?
Oh, we are not sharing audio. Oh, well, I could play the audio.
There it is.
There we go. It was fine. It does have the potential to be done as a live performance that I believe was being projected behind him while he was performing on a stage. And that adds like an interesting, just went to the next slide. But it adds this interesting added feature to a live performance instead of just, you're going to stare at a person. You're now staring at what they're actually doing. So for capstone projects, we do have the possibility for a live performance or the art installation. I believe those two are probably the most lucrative of the possibilities. You could still do the recording and doing the recording and composing, but I feel like those two are probably the most interesting in terms of a project. It would be most helpful, though, if a student was considering this for the capstone project, would obviously be getting comfortable with the software, using it, getting familiar with coding and the technology being used. There's a lot of different algorithms when you make a new data set, and it would probably be helpful to know, hey, what does this algorithm actually do? Not just, I'm going to hit the LDA and hope something happens. And then they would need to prepare their samples. That's one thing that the software doesn't have, is you can't actually record a sample with the software. You have to pre-record them and then put them into the software. And it would kind of be like preparing music for, say, a concert if you're a musician. So it's not too difficult to do, but it is an added thing that the student would have to do. In terms of Stetson investments, the software is free. So they would the biggest investment they would have to do would just be physically downloading it. And as we mentioned earlier, we all have Mac products here, so it would be a little bit of getting around the firewall. And then any supporting softwares to record it onto a DAW, we would need supporting software to record the output into a DAW. The one that the developers listed in their resource article was Soundflower, but I believe there's other ones out there as well.
Right, so in conclusion, there's a lot of potential with this software. It's good for ambient music, can be used for beat making. As we said, it works very well with short percussive samples. And yeah, it's still developing, but it has a lot of potential going forward. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, so there's our sources.
And we do have a demo.
Yes.
Demo.
Demo time.
Demo time.
Demo time.
All right. I can handle this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the session that comes preloaded with AudioStellar. As you can see, there are over 2,000 samples within this. So I'll just go through each of the units and just show you basically how they work. So you have, as we said, when you start the program, you are automatically loaded into the Explorer unit. So you can basically just click around and hear the different samples. Please work. Might be something. Yeah, it might be something to do with the.
Oh, you might have to check the
There
audio
we go.
settings. Yeah.
Yep. There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, so yeah, you can basically just click around. As you can see, it basically gathers the different samples into these different groups based on their spectral qualities. They're called clusters, I should say that, instead of groups. But yeah, there's a bunch of different samples around here to use. Explorer unit is very kind of basic, just hearing the samples. And then over here, you can click to add the different units. So start with the sequence unit. So you can, with the sequence unit, you can, as we said, draw lines between the different, oops. Yep. There we go. You can create like little basic sequences with it. It does the spacing between the different the different samples in the constellation is it determines how long each one will play. And as you can see at the very top there's a BPM marker, so you can do ridiculous stuff with it as you see fit. And yeah, and over here, as you can see, there are different parameters that you can control with the sequence. For example, you can change it to be like that. You can lengthen it. You also have this offset control here, which changes the way that that the rhythm works. Yeah. And yeah, the what? Yeah. So as we were talking about, there is this mutate function here, which when you turn it up, it starts moving these samples, or it starts moving the constellation around two different samples, and you can like turn up the mutation parameter, and it will start going crazy and just moving all over the place. You can turn it down if you want to keep it more contained, really. And yeah, have these controls here to control the different ways that will mutate. And yeah, that's the sequence unit. Just mute that. Yeah, and also you have these controls over here. You can mute each unit. You can solo them. So there's really a lot of potential here with with creating a piece of music within the software itself.
Also one thing I think we should mention, I mean, there is, of course, ways, like you can just select your points again and stop the sequence, but we didn't find out how to, like, delete the units once you add them. I don't know if you guys figured it out.
Yeah.
So I think they're just, like, you have to be very, like, selective with what you're adding, because it's kind of just on the side there forever until you start a new session.
Yeah. So yeah. I'm just gonna let that go wild.
Yeah, it's having a great time in the back.
It's just dancing.
It's dancing.
So then the other unit is the particle unit, which when you click, as you can see, it's kind of small, but every click that you do emits a particle that can hit different samples. And where is it? You can turn up the amount of particles that you're as well. You can oh yeah, explosion, send particles in all directions, and you can control the behavior of them using these parameters on the side here. So like for lifespan, this determines obviously how long those last, which can be very useful in making sure that it doesn't spread way out, because we had some issues when we were first doing it with, we would click to do the particles with the explosion on, and because the lifespan was turned up so high, they would really they would hit samples that were way out of what we even thought it could hit, or way out of the scope of what we thought. And yeah, and the speed obviously determines how fast the particles move, and the density determines how many of them are produced with each click. Yeah.
It's also not a good idea to have a high density and a high lifespan, because it will make your computer very sad very fast.
Yeah. And then there's also, there is an OSC unit. This involves a lot more technical language and a lot of coding, so we didn't really get to use it, but it is there. It's very, I guess, customizable in that you obviously determine what goes into it. You type in the different code for OSC, and yeah, that's the basic demo.